So wonderful to see so many familiar faces, and thank you very much for inviting Ranil again, Ranil Mate. It's lovely to come back to Sri Lanka after over 3 years. Hello, Kushi. To see Dhamma friends and to be able to connect with you and to be here and do a little teaching, catching up with people in Sri Lanka after a really rough time here. And hopefully things are improving, we hope. I know a friend of mine said that if we have Dhamma, it's much easier to bear. But if you don't have the Dhamma, when things go so become so difficult, of course, then it's really hard to make sense of it, to keep the mind positive. So I was just going to reflect on these things, and first of all to say that for a new year, it's great that we actually started in a good way. I know we have a number of New Years. Before I left Melbourne, we celebrated the Lunar New Year, Chinese New Year. They have to call it Lunar now. It's politically correct. So there are a number of New Years, and of course the one that I was thinking of was 31st of December, but many Sri Lankan people will think of April, won't they? April 13th or April 14th really is New Year's Day. But it's always good to start the new year by doing something good, and of course listening to Dhamma like this evening is a good thing to do. But even better is to meditate, to practice that Dhamma. And part of practicing Dhamma is meditation. It's an important part, because this is how we can influence the mind. And this evening I was thinking of a theme, and I thought, well, why do we meditate? Why do we meditate? People often ask that, and somebody in Australia asked me, why do we meditate? And I think it's a good question, and I will talk about it during this talk. So if you want to make the new year good, of course, we have to develop the mind. When we develop the mind in peace and clarity, this is a good way to start the new year. This is a good way to experience a new year, to experience life in a better way, with clarity and peace in the mind. And I liken this, the Buddha's teaching, and especially meditation, to interior decoration. We are making the mind beautiful. And I know Ajahn Brahm often calls he used to call it, not so much these days, his beauty parlour. What is it a beauty parlour for? The mind. This is really so important. And of course, we all know, we can ask, well, where is our experience of life coming from? It's coming from our minds. Because all of you will know people who are comfortable, not necessarily a lot of stress in their life, and they've got things well set up, but their minds are in a very negative state. And so they can't enjoy what they have. And this is not uncommon, actually, because they haven't developed the mind. So our experience of life is coming from in here, and not from outside. I know we all like to have comfortable lives, have nice houses, nice cars, and all that sort of thing. But in the end, that will not make us necessarily happy. If we have happiness in here, then those things will be very pleasant for us to have. And it's like our mind is a filter for our experience. And if we have negative mind states, it's like putting a dark filter on what we're experiencing. And when that dark filter is like depression, anxiety, stress, all these things that really colour the way we experience life. But of course, if we develop the mind, if we recondition the mind, we can put a very pleasant filter, which is happiness and peacefulness. If we develop that in the mind, that's how we will see the world. We'll tend to see the world, and we'll be able to deal with difficulties much, much better. So this is why we meditate, basically, is because if we can develop the mind in very good states, that will really improve the quality of our lives manyfold. And we all know, even though people know this, happiness, where does it come from? Inside. But most people are trying to get it from outside, aren't they? And I always liked what Ayakema said. This is the German nun who ordained here in Sri Lanka with Venerable Narada. She's now passed away, obviously, many years ago, 1997. She said, there is no hole in this body or mind to push happiness through. We actually give happiness to the things we experience. Because otherwise, isn't it? If happiness was coming from outside, the same things would make us all happy. That's not true. Many different things. And of course, this points to the fact that the Lord Buddha mentions that the mind is the forerunner of our experience. There's the first gatha, isn't it, of the Dhammapada, which says, all experiences, this is an English translation, is preceded by mind, led by mind, made by mind. Speak or act with a corrupted mind, and suffering follows, as the wagon wheel follows the hoof of the ox. And so that's very, very much the case why we meditate, because we want to develop the mind in good qualities, good states of mind, in peaceful states of mind, in wise states of mind. This is the point of it. And I think this is so important because living in very troubling times, anybody here disagree with that? You know, very troubling times here in Sri Lanka, but not only in Sri Lanka. You see it all around the world. I don't know if many of you seen what's happening in the Ukraine. Have you seen that? That's dreadful, you know, that whole war. But when we see all these things, of course, we can get overwhelmed with negativity, can't we? It can really drag the mind down. And some people get quite depressed, some get anxious. We get all sorts of views and opinions. I call these stories about reality. And so many conspiracy theories. They're amazing. Some of them are very, very creative, I think. But so there is all those negative events happening, but also the difficulties in our life are a big factor too. Whether it's at home, wherever we work, or at school, all places. And often, one of the biggest areas of problems and difficulties, isn't it, is with who? Don't say your husband or your wife. Ourselves. This is actually a very problematic area. Human beings are really complex. So, and of course there are other things like, of course we have to deal with the physical problems we approach as we get older. I'm certainly encountering it, and all of us do, when we have old age, sickness and death to deal with. So there's a lot of things that can give rise to these negative qualities in the mind. But it's very important, I just mention it in particular, that all the views and opinions we have about what is happening, say for instance in Sri Lanka, about the politics, about the economy, if we developed very negative states from those views, from that point of view that we hold, that belief that we hold, this is not useful for us because it's dragging the mind down. And I always say to people, whatever view you have, the Lord Buddha calls ditthi, just check up on the effect it's having on your mind. If it's creating more anger, more problems in the way you relate to people, to yourself, then to not pursue that, not hold on to that view, because it's not good for your mind. Like food that is toxic or poison is poisoning the mind. So it's very important to do that, because I know here in Sri Lanka at the moment there are many, many views probably about politics and about the economy, the government, all these sorts of things. But always good to check up, how is it affecting my mind? And if it is having a negative effect, let it be as much as possible, not get involved with it, not dwell on it. Because of course the Lord Buddha says, whatever we pay attention to, that will grow. So if you have negative views, it will give rise to, the Lord Buddha says, to negative perceptions. Then the thinking will dwell on that, and that will support the view, and then that will get stronger. And it brings with it all these emotions, this anger. It can bring with it anger, rage, a delusion. It can bring with it violence. So very good to check up. So it does lead, and I think this is really important to mention. I just say too that you may think that the Lord Buddha never experienced this, but really the Bodhisattva, before he became the Lord Buddha, one of the reasons he talks about in some of the sutras, especially in the Sutta Nipata, is the state of the world at that time. You can just see the state of the world, the turmoil within the world, the turmoil within people. And that was one of the things that really propelled him, really drove him to seek an answer, to develop the spiritual path. And so even the Lord Buddha had this to deal with as well. But one of the questions that I have, and I think some of you may have it too in your mind, is, well, are human beings inherently bad or evil? Because I think sometimes people think that, don't they? That it really gets depressing. You see how people behave. You can't comprehend why they would do what they do, why they say what they say. And it's very useful to investigate that, because it really, if we have that view, it really, it's a very depressing view. It shakes our confidence in humanity, that we can deal with the problems in the world, deal with the problems we're experiencing ourselves. And so this, I will address that too in this talk, and that's one of the main focuses. So a few focuses there. Why meditate? And also, are human beings inherently, negative? Is that the quality that we are, as it were, is fundamental in the human mind? And I will say that the Lord Buddha says no. Give you a hint beforehand. But I had a nice simile that came to me some years ago. I gave a talk called Blue Sky Mind. Blue Sky Mind. It was about 6 years ago. And I know I've heard subsequently, maybe even some time ago, other teachers have used this simile too. So it probably has occurred to some of you as well, the blue sky mind. And do you know, anybody know what the blue sky mind would be? What it refers to? Some of you have heard my talk, so you know. No, it's the experience we've all had, if we've flown on an aeroplane, isn't it? And the plane takes off, and then sometimes there are clouds and stormy weather, and the plane goes through the clouds, it climbs, and maybe a bit of, keep your seatbelts on, there's a bit of shaking, everybody think, ooh, turbulence. But then you break through the clouds, and what's above? It's amazing. Blue sky and the sun. And when we see that, when I experience that, it feels like it's always been there, really. It's always like there. And these clouds and this stormy weather is below it. And when I first experienced that, it was really about 6 years ago that I really focused on that. I thought, it's so inspiring. It's so uplifting when we can break through the clouds, we can break through the storms in our lives. And mainly because this blue sky is so vast and pure. That's what it seems like to my mind. And it seems peaceful too in that sort of environment. And of course, I often think Christians may think of it as like They often think of heaven as being this sort of cloud place, woolly clouds in heaven, and these angels and so on. But it's this blue sky. It's a nice simile for me. And I'll explain how I experience it, and maybe it will relate to you. And of course, the clouds and the stormy weather, the bumpy, the turmoil, the turbulence that you experience in the plane, that's like the defilements in our lives. They buffet us around, they push us around. What makes our lives difficult is not out there. I know there's a lot of things out there that can make it troublesome, for sure. I call them triggers. But it's the things in here that make our life really difficult. And they are the defilements. And so this is basically what the Lord Buddha calls desire and aversion and delusion. We say lobha, dvesha and moha. And that's also the problems in our lives and in the world, the negative thinking that we can experience. And it's good to reflect. It's also like the turmoil in the world is related to the 8 worldly conditions. Have you heard of the 8 worldly conditions? Loka Dhammas. This is what the Lord Buddha teaches about. And what Sri Lanka is experiencing now very strongly, and many other places in the world too, is the Loka Dhamma of loss, of the economy going down. And this is creating a lot of problems for Sri Lanka and in other places too. We all want gain. We don't want loss. People want to get. They don't want to lose. And they all want the other qualities, the other worldly dhammas. They want to be, well, sometimes you say famous, but, high status. Not to be anonymous or to lose our status. And everybody wants praise, not blame. And there's a lot of blame going around, isn't there? That's one of the things you can be sure of in these sort of situations where we're experiencing a lot of problems. And of course, the other worldly dhamma is pleasure and pain. And it's quite painful when there is loss. There's economic loss, economic hardship, and many people finding it difficult to even, find enough food. So this is the clouds. This is the stormy weather. The good news is it can't last forever. And so that's good for Sri Lanka too. But it's also important to reflect, the clouds and the stormy weather in our lives. That's where, unfortunately, it's where we grow, where we develop insight. It's not when we're comfy and everything is going the way we want. It's when we have to confront difficulties in life, when we have to confront the defilements that may be very, very strong. And sometimes people say to me, and I see it for monks and nuns too, that, if they have strong defilements coming up, say like sexual desire or something, they think, oh no, I'm not practicing right. But this is actually where they can grow, when they understand that sexual desire and can let go of it. And it's the same for all of our defilements. They're actually propelling us to grow when we have to deal with them in a good way, a wholesome way. So this is where we learn with the difficulties, in the stormy weather, in the clouds that we experience. And it can give rise to what the Lord Buddha calls samvega. And this is a sense of, I must do something about this. This is one thing, isn't it? When we have dukkha in our lives, when there is suffering in our life, it really pushes us, doesn't it? It really does. We have to do something. I mean, even the most lazy person, if they have enough pain and difficulty in their life, they'll get going. They'll have to address it. So this samvega really motivates us, and this is, of course, what motivated the Lord Buddha to go forth to seek the answers to old age, sickness and death. So when these clouds and storms are quite, they have a positive side. I won't say they're useful. Anybody here not had clouds and storms in their lives? Please stand up. You're very blessed if you haven't, really blessed, because this is such a common experience for us. And the clouds and storms, of course, include, not only the defilements, the negative mental states that we experience, but even old age, sickness and death. That is really confronting. I say to people, as I'm getting older, I had my 70th birthday last December, it really is tough practice, to face old age, sickness and death is confronting. And this is where the practice of the Dhamma is very useful, very helpful, as it is with the present situation in Sri Lanka. So, and of course this blue sky, what does that represent? We talked about the clouds and the stormy weather, and the blue sky is breaking through all that and dealing with our personal problems and being able to cope with, manage the problems that we see in the world, deal with them in a positive way. And it's a mind that's free from the defilements, much freer, or reduced. So it's very helpful. So that desire and the aversion and delusion goes down. So the blue sky mind is like having purity of mind, like when we meditate and the negative qualities of the mind go down and a feeling of peace can be there. And the sky, like the vastness that the mind can have, spaciousness that the mind can have. And of course, because the blue sky is sort of like one phenomena, it's like oneness in the mind and also silence. So that was a lovely simile that I find very uplifting, because if you think these storm clouds are going to be here forever, wow, that drags one down. That we cannot get beyond them. They cannot be dealt with. That really depresses the mind. But when we know, yes, we can go through these, and there is the blue sky beyond, always is, really, then that can lift the mind. But I have another simile too that I like very much as well. Ajahn Brahm uses this simile too in a slightly different way from it. He uses it a number of different ways actually, but I don't use it in the same way. When I was on pilgrimage with Ajahn Brahm in 2001, we went to Nepal and to Kathmandu, and there at the airport we saw that they have a local airline called Buddha Air. Have you seen it? Buddha Air, isn't it great? I think, how amazing. And Ajahn Brahm often mentions it. And so I was thinking, yes, we can get on board Buddha Air and get beyond the clouds and the storms and really see the mountains and really see the blue sky, the clear blue sky. And of course, in my mind, see, I'm really creative with this one. The Buddha Air is like the Noble Eightfold Path. And that may sound a bit fanciful, but there was one time that Venerable Ananda was in Savatthi, and he saw the Brahmin Janasoni going out in his chariot. And it was all white. He was wearing white. The horses were white. Everything was really, immaculate. And it was sort of like the BMW of their time, probably. He liked to drive around Savatthi, presumably to impress, I think. But then Venerable Ananda, when he met the Buddha, he said, I saw the Brahmin Janasoni. He was an advisor to the king. That's why he was so wealthy that he could afford this chariot and all the accessories. And Venerable Ananda said, I saw this chariot the Brahmin Janasoni was driving around Savatthi. And is there anything that's similar to this divine vehicle, he called it? And the Buddha said, yes, the Noble Eightfold Path. So maybe Buddha Air is like the Noble Eightfold Path. So, and it can help us go through those clouds. Because if we are practicing Dhamma, that can help us deal with the storms in our lives very much. And also particularly, if we've got a right view, a right understanding of the nature of reality, of life, it can help us solve a lot of, not solve necessarily, but accept a lot of things in life that we find difficult, the turmoil in the world. For instance, the Four Noble Truths are a wonderful way to deal with the storms and clouds in our lives, to give us an understanding of what's going on. Because the clouds and storms are like dukkha, aren't they? The First Noble Truth, suffering, unsatisfactoriness. Everybody knows about that. And if the Buddha had only given us one Noble Truth, that would be a bit depressing, because we all know it quite well. And the second Noble Truth, of course, is the cause of suffering, and that is desire, wanting, craving, tanhaya, of course. But the blue sky is like the ending, the cessation of that unsatisfactoriness, that craving, that suffering. And of course the fourth Noble Truth is like the blue sky too, that path that can take us to beyond the clouds, beyond the turmoil, beyond the storms in our lives. So it's a wonderful thing. This right view cannot be emphasised too much. And there's a lovely saying I often quote from Viktor Frankl, who is the author of Man's Search for Meaning. Some people say it could be changed. It should be a person's search for meaning. But when he wrote it, that was okay. So, and he made this comment, and I think it so relates to the Buddha's teaching, where he said, suffering without meaning equals despair. Don't we see that in the world? People just can't fathom why the world is like it is, why their minds are like they are. And so this is where the wonderful gift that the Lord Buddha gave us with right view. This is the view of an enlightened being. So we can take this and use this. And when we do actually see it for ourselves, this will make our lives so much more peaceful, so much more at ease with the way things are. Because all of us generally are fighting with reality. We don't like it as it is, and we are fighting with it. But once we understand what's going on, then we can accept it, and we can be at peace and be far more effective in the way we're dealing with reality. Far more realistic, isn't it? Because sometimes we're expecting life to be in certain ways and people to be in certain ways. It's just not going to happen. It really can't. So, and when we have that understanding, it's like we break through to that blue sky and we're seeing the nature of reality. And of course, the nature of reality is always the same. Whether there is a Buddha or not, he mentions that whether a Tathagata is in the world or not, it is always the same, which is that nothing lasts, anitya in similar, it will all be impermanent, pass away, change. And because of that, of course, can we get permanent happiness, permanent satisfaction? No. Anyone done it? That's great. No, it's going to be unsatisfactory. Sometimes we get what we want, but then things change and it's not the way we want it any longer. And of course, the other aspect of reality is that it's not personal. It's always been a process of body and mind that we have mistakenly claimed as ours, thinking we own it. And like craving, we think we own the craving. We are the ones craving and choosing. But this is not in fact, in reality. And once we understand that, we can stop fighting with reality. So I would just like to return to that are humans intrinsically bad? Because this is like, are those storms and those clouds permanent? Of course, you've got a good hint, just what I said before. Everything is impermanent in samsara, everything, including the sense of self that we have. But when I say that, I also like to qualify it, because most people say, well, I feel like there's someone in here, thank you very much. And of course there is a personality and a character, isn't there? We all have personalities and characters. But they're not permanent, they're changing. And sometimes they change for the better, isn't it? You've probably had friends who have really, not been so good, and then they've really developed into very fine human beings with really good quality. And the reverse also happens. People that were good people really degenerate, perhaps because of drugs, alcohol, relationship problems. It can be many things. So this personality, this character, is not permanent and it's changeable. But we can influence it by practicing the Noble Eightfold Path. So are human beings intrinsically bad? And of course you have in Christianity the idea of original sin. I think most people have heard of this idea, which really means that there is some inherent evil in people that came about because of Adam and Eve eating this apple, the tree of knowledge. Very interesting, isn't it? Because in Buddhism, knowledge is what leads to understanding and wisdom and freedom. But in this case, it doesn't. And so, of course, it gives rise to, when we have that idea of original sin, it gives rise to wanting to punish ourselves and blaming ourselves, being guilty about we don't know what, really. And so this is a very common experience that people have in other religions, particularly Christianity. But of course, according to right view, this isn't the case. The mind isn't intrinsically bad, isn't intrinsically negative. And this is good news. But the mind is affected and coloured by the positive and negative qualities that are present at a particular time. It's moving all the time, the mind and the body. The mind particularly, you can see it for yourself, I'm sure you all have. And the Buddha mentions that in the morning it can be one thing, by the evening it can be another. Quite a few times in between it can change too. But there's a lovely sutta that makes this very clear, and I think it's good to remember when times are tough and you see so many of the, say, politicians that are on the centre of the stage in the country, and you may think that they're no good or they're terrible people or whatever, and it may shake your confidence in human beings. Sometimes people get very negative about human beings. So the Lord Buddha says, this mind, monks, is radiant, but it is corrupted by passing corruptions. And so I say that an uneducated ordinary person has no development of mind. So it's saying that really the essential quality of the mind is radiant. The essential quality of the mind is like the blue sky. And then he continues, so that's for the person, I didn't read the whole quote, called the uneducated ordinary person. So this is Putujana. This is us, really, in a way. Terrible, isn't it? But nevertheless. But no, it's not really, because we've heard the teachings, and this is a big difference. Many people in the world haven't at all, and so they haven't got any grasp on the nature of the mind, the essential nature of the mind. But the Lord Buddha continues, the mind, monks, is radiant, and it is freed from passing corruptions, and educated, noble disciple truly understands this. So I say that the educated, noble disciple has development of mind. This is making the mind pure. It's making the mind wise and clear and peaceful. So this developing the mind is what we need to do when we practice Dhamma, isn't it? We need to develop the mind in these good qualities. And of course the Buddha mentions too that if we have an undeveloped mind, many people have undeveloped minds. That's why they do what they do, isn't it? In the end, you see, you think, because they haven't realised it's possible. In the West, people don't realise it's possible to develop the mind, cultivate the mind in good qualities, to focus on good qualities and they will grow. But many people actually developing the reverse. They're repeating negative speech, negative actions, and dwelling in negative mind states. And they don't realise by repeating it, by giving those negative states of mind attention, they will grow. They'll get good at it, whether it be anger, irritation, annoyance, being grumpy, being greedy, being deluded. You know, being deluded often is this sense of ego, of self. So these will grow if we cultivate them. It's like our gardens, you know, if we, whatever we put in the garden and we give attention to and do all the necessary things, that will grow. That will be what grows. And of course, as Ajahn Brahm often says, are we cultivating the weeds or the flowers? It's up to us. And we've got a good chance because we have the Buddha's teaching and it can point us in the right area. So it's important to see then when we see that, say the Lord Buddha says the mind is radiant. It means that the mind is not the same as the mental states it experiences. It's not the same as the clouds and the storms that pass through the mind. And therefore change is possible. And we can either develop good qualities or bad qualities by focusing, by repeating things, but by focusing on those qualities too. And they are, as I mentioned in that quote, these are passing corruptions of the mind. These are like visitors to the mind. They're not permanent. And that's good news, because if they were permanent, what could we do about it? Virtually nothing, actually, because that would be our essential nature. And it's very good news that that these arise, you know, these qualities, good or bad, they arise. How do they arise? They arise due to causes and conditions. Big cause for good qualities for us will be focusing on the Buddha's teaching, developing good qualities. And these conditions, this is the repeating of these actions of body, speech and mind. That's how they will grow and we'll become good at good things, or we'll become good at bad things. And that can explain why some people in the world seem to be pretty terrible. And of course, we don't need to be angry about that. We don't need to take revenge on those people because karma will take care of them in due course. They've created those actions, they've developed those states of mind, and they will experience the results of them. Very similar results to the qualities they've developed. So in many ways, when we can see people doing dreadful things, we think, yeah, you know, you can feel a sense of sorry for them because they will, as we say in English, get their comeuppance. They will experience the results of it, either in this life or in a future life. It's often in this life, actually. And you can see it probably even within this country, you know, with political careers and so forth, the comings and going. You think, well, the way things have developed is the nature of karma. You know, have certain actions been done, and there will be results from that. And of course, this is good news that they're not permanent features of our minds. And really, if they were, could Angulimala have become an arahant? No way. So it's very good to see that the intrinsic, the essential quality of each and every one of us, even those terrible people, is a radiant mind. We just have to, as it were, develop our way, develop the Noble Eightfold Path, so we experience that radiant mind that comes from peaceful states of mind, from wise states of mind, really pure states of mind. And of course, this is possible for all of us if we develop the Noble Eightfold Path. Buddha air. So how do we develop it? And of course, we're going to focus on meditation, but of course, never to forget dana, isn't it? Giving. And not only giving to monks and nuns, but giving in general to whoever, and giving with a good heart to develop this happiness that we can enjoy from giving. And this is important because, when the storm clouds are there, when the storms in our lives, the turbulence in our life is there, then giving can be a great help, especially if the mind is feeling somewhat depressed, somewhat discouraged. And in this day and age, or this time in Sri Lanka, giving is really necessary, isn't it? And to help those people that are really in dire straits, we say in English, dire straits. And I know many people have, done their best within their means, just to give lunch packets and things like that to people, to give dry rations to people. And that's sadhu, that's a wonderful thing to do, and to develop the joy and happiness from doing something worthwhile. This is part of the path. This is part of right view. So dana is important, but of course sila, or morality, ethical behaviour, that's really, really essential in our lives. Because this is how we interact with the world and also with ourselves to a large extent, through our actions and our speech. But it's coming from our mind, isn't it, too? So this is an important area to really develop, is sila, that we don't harm ourselves or others. We're not killing living beings, we're not stealing, we're not getting into sexual misconduct, which is in the news all the time these days. And we're not lying, and we're not taking alcohol and drugs, which can lead to all the other problems, breaking the other precepts and lead to harming ourselves and others as well. So very, very important. But of course, big part of the Noble Eightfold Path is about the mind. Well, most of it is about the mind, really. Even the sila aspect is related to the mind. But of course, the last three factors of the Noble Eightfold Path, right effort, samma vayama, samma sati, right mindfulness, and samma samadhi. They are the area of meditation. And of course, right effort is the effort to avoid negative states of mind. And if they do arise, let go of them, and to develop positive states of mind and maintain them. And this is very useful, because if we want to meditate, if we wish to meditate, if we can reduce the negative qualities in the mind, increase the positive, then meditation is very easy. What makes meditation difficult? Defilements. What makes our lives difficult? Defilements, it's the same. So this, of course, meditation can take us through the clouds and storms in our lives. You notice, don't you, when you meditate, I think everyone here who has meditated will probably have experienced, when you come out of meditation, what state of mind do you can, not often, but you can experience. And of course, it's this sort of peace and equanimity that can look on at things that would normally be, upsetting or disturbing, and not being disturbed, not being upset. And this relates to a wonderful story I heard the other day from one of the nuns at our monastery, nuns monastery in Western Australia. It was from Ajahn. She was actually giving a talk to the monks. Very interesting. But she was saying, one of the women was at the monastery, and she said, this woman has real snake karma. And she said she must have come to her kuti, the Ajahn. She's the chief nun there. And she said, there's a snake in my kuti. I can't sleep. And she said, she came. And there was a snake wrapped around the Buddha statue in the kuti, quite a big snake. And she said, well, give me something she'd just come out of meditation, give me something to take the snake out. And this woman reached over and gave her a candle. She said, no, it's too small. But then she said, get something bigger. So she got a bigger stick. And then Ajahn, the chief nun, got the stick, gently got the snake, put it through where the snake was wrapped around, and took it outside and put it in the bush, in the jungle. And it went off. And she said later, is only because the mind was very peaceful and had equanimity. It wasn't afraid. We can be fearless when the mind is in a very balanced state. Because equanimity is this balanced state, this sense of acceptance. And this allows us to be able to deal with things that normally we might have a lot of fear, we might be very upset by. So it's good to keep in mind this is the way meditation works, because as the defilements reduce, the peace, the clarity, the equanimity, all these good qualities grow in the mind. So in meditation, we are, going through the clouds and letting go of the clouds and storms of the past and the future. That's our main problem area. The present moment is usually not too bad, but the past, when we dwell on that, wow. The future, what could happen? Whoa, that's a minefield, isn't it? Yeah. So these clouds and storms we can let go of in meditation when we develop mindfulness, come to the present moment and let the past go. And of course, a big part of the storms and clouds and turmoil in our life is thinking. And in meditation, that calms down. And in meditation, the negative qualities of the mind reduce, and so the mind becomes more and more peaceful, more and more calm. And the more the mind stays, for instance, with the breath, these negative qualities disappear. As the mind starts to become one-pointed, then these negative qualities drop off the radar, and then we experience the blue sky, and we can see the sun. When the breath becomes beautiful, sometimes Ajahn Brahm, he doesn't use it so much these days, beautiful breath, it used to be a big thing. And that's when the mind starts to develop this one-pointedness, and this radiant mind becomes obvious through the nimitta, when bright lights come up and things like that in people's minds. And of course, this is the world of the mind, when the mind goes into deep, deep meditation. This is a different world from the five senses that we have. And this is a place where we can get real peace, real happiness. And then when we come back to the world, to the five sense experiences, it gives us a different way of relating to it, because we realise, this is a safe place, there's a peaceful place inside the mind. So, and of course the Lord Buddha mentions that there are the two aspects that we need to develop in meditation: serenity and insight, vipassana. And he says that the benefit of serenity, when the mind is tranquil, this is when it becomes peaceful, when it becomes settled, when it becomes one-pointed, the benefit of that is that it becomes developed. And the benefit of a developed mind is that we let go of desire, or lust, it says in this translation. Desire goes. And then he says, if the mind, when we develop insight, what's the benefit of that? And this is talking about really the benefit of meditation, isn't it? It says wisdom is developed. That's what we develop. When the mind, first of all, it has to have that serenity, that tranquility, that peace, that brings clarity, freedom from the defilements. Then we can see things as they are. And so when insight is developed, the benefit is wisdom is developed. And what is the benefit of wisdom? All ignorance, all avijja is abandoned, let go of. And then the whole mass of suffering can cease. Because it's because we don't understand the nature of reality, that dependent origination, this whole cycle that leads to suffering in our lives exists. But once we have seen the nature of reality, ignorance is gone, then that whole cycle can finish, cease. So that you often have, for instance, from ignorance, then intentional activities can cease. Then consciousness, especially rebirth consciousness, can cease. Then nama rupa, mind and body is a big part of that, can cease. Then the sense bases, the 6 senses, our 5 senses plus the mind, can cease. Then contact can cease. Then feeling can cease. Then craving, tanhaya, can cease. Then upadana, clinging or grasping. Other ones, attachment can cease. And then bhava can cease. States of existence that we would have been reborn in. Then birth will cease. Then old age, sickness, death, sorrow, lamentation, pain, grief and despair can cease. This is the good news. I think the Lord Buddha is the only teacher who pointed out an exit, a way beyond samsara. All the other religious traditions just continue in samsara, really. They want a heavenly one, but there is also the other option of a permanent hell, which is very, very unpleasant sort of concept, to say the least. So this is what what we can do, develop the mind. We can get on board Buddha air and soar through the clouds and the storms of our lives and what we experience in the world to the blue skies beyond. And how we do this? By developing the Noble Eightfold Path, Buddha air, and to develop purity in the mind, to develop stillness in the mind, to develop the radiance, to actually not develop it, to really connect with it, because it's like the blue sky. That is the essential nature. And to shake off the dusts of the defilements using the Noble Eightfold Path in order to see clearly, to develop vipassana, which will give us an insight into the nature of reality. And the nature of reality is always our lived experience, this body and mind, our bodies and mind. It's not in the books. The books are very helpful. They definitely point us in the right direction. But for our direct experience, it has to be our body and mind, understanding it completely. And we will see the whole nature of reality in this body and mind. And when we do, it will lead. A wise person is a very compassionate person, because they realise what a difficulty, a mind that is undeveloped experiences. The Buddha says an undeveloped mind brings such suffering to that person and others too, others as well. And when somebody realises the Dhamma, when they experience the third noble truth, the cessation of suffering, and the cessation of craving, then they will have a lot of compassion for people caught up in craving, caught up in ignorance, caught up in creating the dependent origination for suffering. They'll know that was my experience too, and then they will have real compassion for people who don't really know what is going on. And I think for the Lord Buddha, most people probably look like crazy people, but he threw us a life buoy that we can use. And this life buoy is Buddha air, is the Noble Eightfold Path. So I'd like to finish there, and afterwards, if there are questions, we can focus on those. I think now maybe a meditation, and at 7:30, we're finishing at 7:30, isn't it? Yeah. So I give no, not that one. Give a meditation, and this is a very useful meditation. I'll preface it. It's a meditation, guided meditation on spiritual recollecting, remembering a spiritual friend, Kalyana Mitra. It's a guided meditation I do. And this morning I was particularly struck by this because I was talking to a man who's almost 90, but he's had a stroke, so he can't speak and he can't move much. His wife was moving his hands into Anjali. It was a big effort to get him to do this and so forth. But I was speaking to him, and his wife told me, he didn't, that big inspiration in his life, because he was from Balangoda, was Venerable Ananda Maitreya. And because as a boy he went to the Dhamma school, the Sunday school, and not that Venerable Ananda Maitreya was teaching at it, but he knew him, and he very inspired. And she said, even now, they have his picture there, and when things are really difficult, just to reflect on Venerable Ananda Maitreya, very helpful for them, and it brings up obviously good qualities, and able to deal with difficult situations, maybe urgent medical problems or whatever. So I think this is very useful to reflect on our spiritual friends. I just mentioned it's a bit like Sangha Nusati. I call it Kalyana Mitra Nusati. But of course, who is the greatest, the best Kalyana Mitra? The Buddha, yeah, exactly. So, but there are a lot of other Kalyana Mitras in our lives that can also give us help, give us support. And many of you will be Kalyana Mitras for each other. That support on the Noble Eightfold Path, which encourages us to keep the focus on our spiritual life, on developing the Noble Eightfold Path. It's very easy to get caught up in worldly things, get carried away with worldly things. But when we hang out with, when we associate with Kalyana Mitras, spiritual friends, it refocuses us, it reminds us, yeah, this is really important. This is actually how I can deal with the world in a much, much better way. So this is a really vital, in fact, a vital quality in the Buddha's Dhamma. Didn't the Lord Buddha said that the whole of the holy life, the whole of the Noble Eightfold Path really rests on good friends. And so this is not a small thing. It's something that really supports and helps us in our practice of the spiritual life. And it can really lift the mind because we get inspired. Inspiration is such a powerful thing. And Ajahn Brahm, I was listening to a recent talk from Ajahn Brahm, and he said, everybody's got enough information about Buddhism. That's not a problem. They've got enough. He says, but inspiration they need. And this is what his talks are really focusing on that, inspiring us. Because when we have inspiration, then we can practice. We've got the energy. And of course, the Kalyana Mitra will support us and give us advice, and they can guide us. We can get some good advice from Kalyana Mitras about how they dealt with problems in their life. So this is something that's very useful for us. And they can show, I think one of the best things about a Kalyana Mitra, whoever they be, is that they show a lived example of good qualities. And it makes it much easier for us to develop those qualities, doesn't it? Because you can see, I can see how it's done. So this is very, very useful for us. And of course, it's not only that side. The Kalyana Mitra can point out our faults. And if they're really a Kalyana Mitra to us, we will respect them and be able to hear them. Often when people point out our faults, we take it rather personally and not very positively. How dare you? But if a Kalyana Mitra points out a fault, it can be very useful for us. If we can hear it, really hear it, we know they've got our best interest at heart. So it is very, very useful to have a Kalyana Mitra. And of course the Lord Buddha was the supreme, the best. But there are Dhamma teachers today who are also, the next after that, of course, any enlightened beings, monks, nuns, lay people. They are the best Kalyana Mitra. And then Dhamma teachers, that's the next one, isn't it? And they can be very important for us and inspire us, encourage us. When we start to, this is the big thing a Kalyana Mitra can do, when we feel a bit sort of like, I can't do it, they can really encourage us, give us support that we can do it. And this is what Ajahn Brahm is like actually for us. He's a bit like a coach. He says, yes, you can do it, you can do it. At times when we think, I don't know. So very useful. But our parents too can be Kalyana Mitras and family. I don't know about you, but grandparents can be really very good Kalyana Mitras. You know, they can have a big impact. And our teachers, you know, even at school or wherever, university and college. I still remember some of my teachers from high school, secondary school. And they left quite an imprint on the mind, positive imprint on the mind. So good. And we have our friends, of course. They can be Kalyana Mitras and employers sometimes. I know some very inspiring employers here in Colombo who are really good examples, I think, for their employees. And who else can be a Kalyana Mitra? We ourselves, we have to be our own Kalyana Mitra too. Because we all have good qualities, wise qualities. We also have the other side, don't we? The foolish qualities, the negative qualities. But we do have these good qualities. And it's extraordinary that we can listen to teachings and we can actually, we feel in us, yes, this is the case, this is true. We have that wisdom within us that we can recognise something as yeah, that's right, that's valid, that's true. And that's what the Lord Buddha says. It's an amazing thing that beings that are caught up with attachment, are caught up with restlessness, are caught up with conceit, with a sense of self. There is one more. He says that they will listen to a teaching that is the complete opposite of that. Nothing to do with that. It's actually about removing all those things. But he says it's amazing. People will listen to it. Because there's something in us that says, yeah, that's true, that's right. We don't know quite why that is the case often, but we have intuition. Yeah, that's right. So there are so many Kalyana Mitras in our lives, and must get on with this. But one of the things that's important is how do we meet a Kalyana Mitra? How do we cultivate more Kalyana Mitras in our lives? And of course, we do by being open to learning. Oftentimes, and you've probably experienced this, there are people that have so much knowledge, there's just no way they're open to learning anything different. It's just incredible. And they're very attached to that knowledge and they'll argue about it. And it can just mean that they're not really open to learning. They're like a full cup. They've got so many views and opinions that they are, they can't take anybody else's advice. They're not open to it. But at the same time, one should not be gullible with other people, especially some people are they take as Kalyana Mitras people that are not suitable really. And if they do contemplate, if they do see, does this person have good qualities? Is their sila good? That can give them an indication. And we need to be humble. Of course, this is related to being open, isn't it? Humble, that we're not so proud and full of ourselves and think we know best. We usually do. And we need to be respectful of our Kalyana Mitras because they are a treasure, really. Really treasure. I think in Sri Lanka, and I see it in Australia too, especially in the Sri Lankan community, people have this network of Kalyana Mitras. And it's lovely. I think most people in the West, they have networks of, their friends that play golf or drink or something like that, but not Kalyana Mitras. I mean, when life gets really tough, they're not really a support, not really. They are somewhat of a support because they're friends, but they're not a support for really understanding what they're going through. And of course we need sincerity as well, and we need intelligence. intelligence, always with the Buddhist path, intelligence. And these spiritual friends, they can bring up the sense of gratitude, of joy. Inspiration is a big one, and respect and faith. And there can be a sense of safety and security with a Kalyana Mitra. Because Kalyana Mitra, you can talk to them about things that matter in our lives. You know, a lot of people you can't really. But with a Kalyana Mitra, we're much more on the same wavelength, they say, isn't it? We can understand each other, and we can give, we can listen to each other and give advice or talk about what we experienced or what worked for us. So it's very important, this Kalyana Mitra in our lives. So sadhu, that a lot of you have this network, support network really, for practicing the Dhamma. And this is great. This is a condition for developing the Noble Eightfold Path. So, shall we have a guided meditation? Let's do it. It won't be too long. Yes, we do our best. So, please find a comfortable posture if you want to adjust your posture. And we can close the eyes and come into the present. We've got nothing to do for the moment, just to be here. And we have nowhere to go for the moment, just to be here. And we can just notice how the body is and make any adjustments we need. Seeing if the shoulders are comfortable. You can actually move them around a bit to relieve or release any tension, any stiffness from sitting, and to see, to experience whether they're balanced. The shoulders are balanced over the hips, and the hips feel comfortable, and the feet are comfortable on the floor, hands comfortable on the lap or on the knees, and a sense of stability. And we can relax the body mentally, starting at the top of the head and giving this warm, relaxing attention, like a mental massage, to the top of the head, back of the head, side of the head, soothing, relaxing that area. And moving the attention to the forehead, to around the eyes, the cheeks, around the mouth, and giving this warm, gentle, relaxing attention to those areas. Bringing to mind the neck, all around the neck, and soothing it, giving the neck a mental massage. And bringing to mind the right shoulder, starting at the neck and moving our attention along the shoulder and giving the right shoulder this mental massage, soothing it, relaxing it. And it may even sag a little as it relaxes, as it lets go of any stiffness, any tension. And now bringing to mind the right arm, starting at the top of the right arm and moving our attention down the right arm, all around it, to include the wrist, the hand, the fingers and the elbow. Just soothing with this warm, relaxing attention. And now bringing to mind the left shoulder, and starting at the neck and moving our attention along the left shoulder to soothe, to relax the left shoulder, to allow any tension, tightness, stiffness to dissolve. And that the left shoulder can even sag a little too as it lets go of this tension. And we can bring to mind the left arm and move the attention down the left arm, all around it to include the elbow, the wrist, hand and fingers, and give the left arm a mental massage, soothing it, relaxing it. Now bringing to mind the back, starting just below the shoulders and moving our attention down the back with this warm, relaxing, kind attention, soothing any tense or stiff areas, painful areas with this kind, relaxing attention. And we can bring to mind the front of the body, starting just below the shoulders, and move our attention down the chest, the area of the chest, the diaphragm, stomach and abdomen, just giving this soothing mental massage with warmth and kindness. And now we can bring to mind the right leg, starting at the top of the right leg and moving our attention down the right leg to include the knee, ankle, foot and toes. With this, giving the right leg a mental massage with kindness, care. And now bringing to mind the left leg, starting at the top of the left leg and moving our attention down the left leg, all around it, to include the knee, the ankle, foot and toes, soothing it with a mental massage, with warmth, kindness and gentleness. And now we can just be aware of the whole body sitting here, experiencing the body, experiencing whatever is coming to our awareness moment by moment, sounds, feelings in the body, temperature of the air, whatever it is in the present moment. Just being here now. And now we can bring to mind someone who's been an important spiritual friend for us, a Kalyana Mitra, a spiritual friend. Maybe a monk or a nun or a lay teacher, it may be a family member, it may be a friend that you, a friend in a Dhamma group like this. It may be someone who's living or passed away, or it could even be someone one hasn't met, except through books or on the internet, through videos or on the internet. Just bring to mind an important spiritual friend, Kalyana Mitra. And we can get into contact with a feeling that arises when we recollect, when we remember this spiritual friend. Maybe it's a feeling of inspiration, of joy, or maybe gratitude, thankfulness, or one of the qualities that our spiritual friend has. And we can fill ourselves with this feeling that arises from our spiritual friend. Fill the body from head to toe. Fill the mind. And it can bathe any negative mind states we may have. With this positive quality, which is not trying to get rid of these negative mind states, just to allow them, letting them be. Filling ourselves with the feeling that arises from our Kalyana Mitra, important Kalyana Mitra. And we can give a gift of this feeling that arises from recollecting how important Kalyana Mitra. We can give a gift to the breath of this feeling. As we breathe in, we can breathe in this feeling, maybe of inspiration, of joy, of feeling so lucky to know this person or to have known this person. Breathing it in and breathing out this feeling. Breathing it in and breathing it out. And if this feeling reduces, then we can remember that spiritual friend, that Kalyana Mitra, to bring up the feeling as we breathe it in and breathe it out. It enables us to stay with the breath much more easily. And as we're coming closer to the end of the meditation, we can share whatever positive feeling we developed, whether it be inspiration or joy or a sense of faith or confidence, gratitude. We can share whatever feeling we experienced with everyone here, wishing that they may have this quality, this feeling that we've experienced. It may support their lives, enrich their lives. Wishing them well. And we can share this feeling with all those beings that live around this area, unseen beings, animals, insects, lots of insects, and reptiles, and keep expanding it further and further, sharing this feeling, whatever feeling we experienced, this joy, inspiration, gratitude. Sharing it with all these beings in ever-widening circles to cover the whole of this planet and all realms of existence. Wishing them well, wishing that they too may find a Kalyana Mitra in their life, or Kalyana Mitras in their life. And now we can come back to ourselves, to the feeling we experienced, and we can have the aspiration to develop the good qualities of our spiritual friend, Kalyana Mitra, and develop more and more these positive emotions of joy, inspiration, thankfulness that arise from remembering, keeping in mind our spiritual friends. And to share these good qualities and feelings that arise from recollecting our spiritual friend with others, share it with others. And to have the aspiration that our speech and actions be a gift coming from the good qualities that we're encouraged to develop by our Kalyana Mitras. And we can anchor this feeling in our hearts that has arisen from remembering our Kalyana Mitra. And now we can review how we feel now. How do I feel now? Is the mind in a different place? Does it feel different? Has it got different qualities in it? Was the mind able to develop this sort of feelings of inspiration or joy, appreciation, thanks, feeling of being lucky to have spiritual friends, Kalyana Mitras? And we can also reflect what caused these feelings to arise, what triggered them, what brought them up in our minds and hearts. And now we can slowly come out of the meditation, open our eyes and stretch our bodies. So I'd like to finish here with a blessing, and also if anybody has any individual questions that they'd like, personal questions, they'd like to ask, you're welcome to come up. I usually notice that when after I finish the session, then people come up. Then they ask the questions. But there doesn't seem to be a way that one can bring those questions into the session itself. So we have just a short blessing for all of you for this evening, and to share the merits with those that have passed away. All of you, myself included, will have people who have passed away. So it's always very nice to, whatever good things we do, through body, speech or mind, to recollect them and, as it were, dedicate the merit to them for their happiness and well-being in their new life. Not only those people that have passed away, but friends, family who are experiencing difficulties in their lives. Because amazing mental support, we call it moral support sometimes, but mental support is quite powerful. And especially, when we develop Maitri, metta, kindness, loving kindness, can be very helpful for those people. So, you're welcome to join in when I do the chanting of dedicating the merits and also the blessing, the pin anumodana. Inang volyati nang hontu sukhita hontu nyatayo. Inang volyati nang hontu Sukhita hontu nyatayo. Idam bonyatinam hontu sukhita hontu nyatayo. Itavata cha ame sambatang punya sampadam sambe deva anumodantu samma sampatti sindhya. Itavata cha ame sambatang punya sampadam sambe bhuta anumodantu samma sampatti sindhya. Etavata cha amhe sambatam punya sampadam sambe satta anumodantu samba sampatti sindhya. Akasata chabumata devanaga mahindika punyam tang anumoditva chiram rakantu sasanam. Akasata chabumata devanaga mahindika punyam tang anumoditva chiram rakantu desanam. Akasata chabumata devanaga mahindika punyam tang anumoditva chiram rakantu mam paranti. Abhivadana silisa nijam vunda pachayino chataro dhamma vadanti ayuvano sukham balang ayurarogya sampatti saga sampatti mevacha ato nibbana sampatti iminate samijatu. May you abide in well-being, in freedom from affliction, in freedom from hostility, in freedom from ill will, in freedom from anxiety, and may you maintain well-being in yourselves. May everyone abide in well-being, in freedom from affliction, in freedom from hostility, in freedom from ill will, in freedom from anxiety, and may they maintain well-being in themselves. So sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.